At 93 years old, you stop counting films. You stop counting awards. You stop counting how many people recognized you walking through an airport, how many times your name appeared above a cinema entrance, or how many strangers tried to imitate your voice. You start counting people. The ones who stayed, the ones you lost, and sometimes the ones you would give almost anything to sit beside for 5 more minutes. I've been called Michael Caine for most of my life. But that wasn't the name my mother whispered when I was a boy. That wasn't the name my father gave me. I was Maurice Joseph Micklewhite, a poor kid from London who loved pictures so much that I used to go to the cinema whenever I could. We didn't have television when I was young. The cinema was everything. You walked into that dark room and suddenly poverty disappeared. The war disappeared. The streets outside disappeared. For 2 hours you could be somewhere else. I suppose that's where the dream began. But when people look at my life now, they see the films. Zulu, Alfie, The Italian Job, Get Carter, the Oscars, the Knighthood, Batman, all those years. And I'm grateful for every bit of it. But if you asked me at 93 to tell you about the people I've loved most, I wouldn't begin on a film set. I wouldn't begin in Hollywood. Massive movie fan. I used to go to pictures go much further back. I'd go back to a small home in London. I'd go back to a man who worked hard every day and never lived long enough to see what became of his son. My father, Maurice Micklewhite. Same name as me. My father worked at Billingsgate Fish Market. There was nothing glamorous about it. He wasn't standing under lights. Nobody applauded when he finished a day's work. He wasn't photographed leaving restaurants. He simply worked. That's what men like my father did. They worked because the family needed food. They came home tired, because tiredness wasn't something you complained about. It was just part of life. When I was a boy, I didn't understand how much that would affect me. Children rarely do. You think your father will always be there. You think the man sitting across the table will still be sitting there when you finally become the person you're trying to become. But life doesn't promise you that. During the war, my father was away for years. I was still very young. And when you're a child, several years is almost an entire
The mob wouldn't go down without a fight, but this is different. They've crossed the line.
You crossed the line.
Lifetime. Then he came home. And later, when I began trying to become an actor, he watched me struggle. And I mean struggle. People see an old photograph of you wearing a suit and think you were already on your way. You weren't. I had tiny parts. Sometimes I barely had enough money. I was trying to create a life in a profession that gave you absolutely no guarantee that tomorrow would be better than today. And my father died before everything changed. That's something success could never repair. He died in 1957. Before Zulu, before Alfie, before anyone outside a very small circle had any reason to know who Michael Caine was. Sometimes I've wondered what he would have said. Would he have laughed at the name, Michael Caine? Because remember, that wasn't his boy's name. His boy was Maurice. Would he have enjoyed seeing my face on a cinema poster? Would he have sat
Of tribal leaders by bribing them with precious stones. But their character
quietly at the back and pretended not to be impressed? I don't know. That's the trouble with losing someone before your life changes. You spend the rest of your life imagining conversations that can never happen. There were moments when I wanted to turn around and say, Dad, look, I did it. But there was nobody there. Years later, when I was knighted, I accepted it under my real name, Maurice Micklewhite. People knew Michael Caine. But that day mattered to Maurice. It was my father's name. And in my mind, I suppose I was taking him into the palace with me. That's something fame teaches you eventually. The biggest room you've ever entered can still feel empty if the person you wanted there is gone. My father taught me where I came from. But the person who taught me how to survive was my mother. Ellen, my mother was tough. She had to be. People talk about strong women now as though strength means making speeches. My mother's strength was different. It was getting up when there wasn't enough money. It was making food when there wasn't much food. It was holding a family together while the world outside was at war. She cleaned houses. She cooked. She worked. There was no applause for her either.
One day, I saw a child playing with a ruby.
But she was extraordinary. I remember when my father was going away during the war. I was 6. My brother was still very small. My mother told us that now we had to look after her. Imagine telling a 6-year-old that. Today you'd probably say he's only a child. But we didn't think that way. She told me I had a responsibility. And I believed her. Something changed in me. Suddenly I wasn't merely waiting for adults to protect me. I had a job. Look after Mum. And I think, in some strange way, I've been trying to do that ever since. Not literally, of course. But that idea stayed inside me. Look after the people you love. Don't run away when things become inconvenient. Don't let success convince you that responsibility belongs to somebody else. My mother also had a way of dealing with people who hurt you. She didn't believe in spending your life chasing revenge. If someone treated you badly enough, she believed you simply removed them from your life. Gone, no drama, no great performance, just finished. I remembered that lesson in show business because, believe me, show business gives you plenty of opportunities to use it. But what I remember most about my mother came after she died. Because after she was gone, I discovered something extraordinary. I learned she had another son before her marriage. His name was David. He suffered from severe epilepsy and had spent much of his life in institutional care. I hadn't known. My mother had carried that story quietly. She had visited him. She had loved him. And she had protected the secret for years. When I discovered David existed, I went to see him. And suddenly I saw my mother differently. That's one of the strange things about becoming old. When you're young, your parents are simply your parents. Mum, dad, that's their whole identity as far as you're concerned. Then you grow older and you realize they were human beings before you arrived. They had heartbreaks you never saw. Secrets, regrets, people they loved, things they feared. And sometimes they protected you from truths because they thought carrying the weight themselves was easier than placing it on you. I wish I could have asked my mother more questions. That's another lesson age teaches you. Ask while they're still there. Don't assume you'll have another Christmas, another Sunday, another cup of tea, another afternoon when there's nothing important happening. Because one day you would give anything for one of those supposedly unimportant afternoons. My parents made me who I was. But then life did something else. It made me responsible for another human being. My first daughter, Dominique. When Dominique was born, I wasn't Sir Michael Caine. I wasn't an Oscar winner. I wasn't a millionaire. I was a young actor trying desperately to make a living. Her mother was Patricia Haynes, my first wife. And I wasn't particularly good at being a husband in those days. I was young. I was struggling. I didn't have money. I didn't have stability. I didn't have the wisdom that people like to pretend they had all along when they get old. You don't. You make mistakes. I certainly did. My first marriage failed. And that's not something I look back at and pretend was easy. But Dominique remained my daughter. That never failed. I named her after Dominique Franchon from The Fountainhead. I loved that book when I was younger. But whatever reason you choose a child's name, once they're born, the name belongs entirely to them. And suddenly I wasn't just trying to become an actor. I was someone's father. That changes the stakes. When you're alone and hungry, you can convince yourself that suffering is romantic. I'm an actor. I'm sacrificing for my art. Sounds wonderful. Then you have a child. Now being broke doesn't feel artistic. It feels frightening. Because there's someone else in the equation. Dominique knew me before most people did. That's something children of famous people possess that nobody else can. They knew the person before the myth. The public might see Michael Caine walking into an awards ceremony. A daughter sees her dad. That's a wonderful correction to fame. You could walk into your house carrying an Oscar, and your children could still remind you of something ridiculous you did 25 years earlier. And that's healthy. Very healthy. Because Hollywood has an extraordinary ability to persuade you that you're important. Family has an extraordinary ability to remind you that you're not as important as you think. Years passed. My career finally changed. Then my entire personal life changed too. And another daughter came into the world. Natasha was born in 1973. By then I was living a completely different existence from the young man who had become Dominique's father. People knew me. I had money. The telephone rang. There were scripts. There were premieres. There were restaurants where suddenly people could find you a table. It's funny how success works. Before you're famous, the restaurant is full. After you're famous, somehow there's always one table they've forgotten about. But none of that makes you a better father. Money can make fatherhood easier in practical ways. It can give your children security, education, comfort, travel, a house with enough rooms. But money cannot sit with your child when she's upset. Money cannot listen. Money cannot apologize. Money cannot replace time. And as I became older, time became the currency I cared about most. I had big houses, lovely houses. And yes, I enjoyed them. I'd grown up with very little. Of course I enjoyed finally having space. But eventually I realized the house only mattered when people were inside it. Children, grandchildren, noise, someone walking into the kitchen looking for something to eat. That's a real home. An empty mansion is simply a very expensive building. When my grandchildren were young, there was room for them to run around. And I loved that. Then they grew. Children always do it faster than you expect. 1 minute you're holding them. The next minute they're taller than you and telling you what technology you don't understand. I remember how much I enjoyed collecting my grandson from school. Think about that. I've been to some extraordinary places. I've stood on stages receiving awards. I've attended premieres surrounded by cameras. But picking up your grandson from school can mean more than all of it. Because nobody is giving you an award for being there. You're just there because you love him. Eventually, Shakira and I started thinking about living closer to Natasha. We didn't need the enormous house anymore. And people sometimes found that surprising. Why would Michael Caine give up a huge house? Because houses don't hug you. Square footage doesn't love you. At my age, I didn't need another room. I needed another afternoon with my family. And that brings me to the woman who changed everything. Shakira, now this story is ridiculous. I know it's ridiculous. If someone had put it in one of my films, you might have said the writer had gone too far. I first saw Shakira back in a television commercial, a coffee advertisement. And I thought she was one of the most beautiful women I'd ever seen. Not I'd like to meet her sometime. No, I wanted to know who she was immediately. I thought she was in Brazil. I was prepared to go looking. Then I discovered she was living in London, practically around the corner compared with Brazil. So I found a way to get her telephone number. And I called her. She wasn't immediately impressed, which, looking back, was probably very good for me. I called again. And again. Eventually she agreed to see me. Now people think the romantic part of our story is that I saw her on television and found her. It isn't. That's merely how the story started. The romantic part is what happened during the next 50 years. We married in 1973. Half a century. When you're young, 50 years sounds like ancient history. When you've lived it with someone, it feels impossibly fast. Shakira and I came from different backgrounds, different religions, different experiences. She's Muslim. I'm Christian. People sometimes imagine that difference must create some tremendous philosophical problem. It never did. I loved her, she loved me. That was the philosophy. But Shakira did something far more important than simply become my wife. She changed the direction I was heading. Before Shakira, I drank too much. I've talked about this before. I wasn't waking up in gutters. I wasn't thinking of myself as an alcoholic. That's often how people excuse dangerous habits. I'm not that bad. But you don't have to reach the worst possible ending before something becomes a problem. I was drinking enough that I now believe it could eventually have killed me. Shakira didn't drink. She didn't stand over me and make great speeches. She simply changed the rhythm of my life. And I changed because I wanted the life I had with her more than I wanted the life I was drifting toward without her. I've said she saved my life. I meant it. Think about what that means. If I'd continued the other way, perhaps there would have been fewer films. Perhaps no second Oscar. Perhaps fewer years with my daughters. Perhaps I wouldn't have watched my grandchildren grow. People sometimes save your life dramatically. A doctor, a firefighter, someone pulling you from an accident. And sometimes they save it quietly, by giving you a reason to stop destroying it. That was Shakira. She gave me stability when my entire profession was built around instability. Actors spend their lives leaving. New film, new country, new hotel, new cast. You become very good at saying hello and goodbye. Then you go home. And if you're fortunate, the same person is there. That's the miracle, not the premiere. Coming home. Shakira saw every version of me, not just the charming one in interviews. She saw the tired one, the worried one, the annoyed one, the old one. She knew when I was pretending something didn't bother me. After 50 years, there's not much acting you can do in your own kitchen. Your wife knows that's one of the great comforts of a long marriage. You no longer have to perform. I've worked with extraordinary people. Sean Connery was one of my closest friends. I knew Roger Moore, Laurence Olivier, so many brilliant actors, so many wonderful human beings. And one of the saddest things about reaching my age is that you become the keeper of conversations with people who aren't here anymore. Sean and I knew each other before either of us had become what people eventually imagined us to be. That's special. Someone who knew you before the world decided who you were. And when those people go, you don't just lose them. You lose a witness to part of your own life. A story disappears that only the two of you fully understood. That's why I treasure friendship. But when I strip away everything else, when I ask myself what actually made my life, I come back to family. My father, my mother, Dominique, Natasha, Shakira, 5 people, 5 different kinds of love. My father gave me a name and an example. My mother gave me responsibility and resilience. Dominique taught me that fatherhood begins whether you're ready or not. Natasha helped make the later years of my life about home instead of career. And Shakira gave me the second half of my life. I spent decades acting. People ask me about favorite films, favorite performances, favorite directors. I understand why. That's what they know me for. But I never thought Hollywood was my life. It was my job. A brilliant job. A job beyond anything that little Maurice Micklewhite could have imagined. But still a job. My life was the people waiting when the job was finished. That's the secret fame doesn't advertise. At the beginning, you believe success will be the moment strangers know your name. At the end, success is having people who don't care about your name at all. People who don't need Michael Caine. They need dad. Granddad, Maurice, husband, friend. That's when you understand what mattered. I could show you photographs from films I've made. Hundreds of them. I could cover the walls. But that's not what I want around me. I want family photographs. Because films are memories for the audience. Family photographs are memories for me. There's an enormous difference. One picture can take you back to a day nobody else remembers. A birthday. A holiday. A child making a ridiculous face. Your wife sitting somewhere in the sun. No critics reviewed those moments. No one gave them stars. They never appeared in the newspaper. And yet those are the scenes you replay when you're old. That's the joke, really. You spend your whole career trying to create unforgettable scenes. Then the scenes you can't forget are the ones nobody filmed. My father's hands after work. My mother's voice. My daughters when they were small. My grandchildren running through the house. Shakira beside me. Those are my greatest pictures. And perhaps that's what I've learned after 93 years. Everybody is in such a hurry. We want the next thing. The next job. The next house. The next amount of money. The next person to tell us we've succeeded. I understand it. I spent years chasing things too. But eventually life begins taking instead of giving. Your parents go, friends go, people you assumed would always be there become photographs. And suddenly ambition looks different. I'm not saying don't be ambitious. Be ambitious. Work harder than everyone else. I did. But don't confuse the work with the reason you're alive. The applause ends, the cinema empties, the lights come up, and you go home. Make certain there's something there worth going home to. Because if you ask me now what I'm proudest of, I could give you the professional answer. 2 Oscars. The films. The honors. The career. But that's Michael Caine's answer. Maurice Micklewhite's answer is simpler. I loved people. And I was loved back. My father didn't live to see the famous years. My mother didn't see all of them either. Some of my oldest friends are gone. My daughters grew up. My grandchildren grew up. And somehow Shakira and I grew old together. That's life, not a straight line, not a perfect script. People arrive, people change you, people leave. And if you're lucky, a few stay long enough that when you finally look backward, you realize they were the story all along. So don't remember me only as Alfie, or Charlie Croker, or Harry Palmer, or Alfred Pennyworth. Those men belong to the screen. Remember that somewhere underneath all of them was a boy named Maurice, who loved his father, who listened to his mother, who became a father before he understood what being a father meant, who discovered that grandchildren could make an ordinary afternoon feel more important than an award ceremony, and who once saw a woman in a coffee commercial and had absolutely no idea that he was looking at the person who would change the rest of his life. If there's one thing 93 years can teach you, it's this. Eventually, nobody asks how many rooms were in your house. Nobody cares how many times your name appeared in lights. What remains are the people whose absence can still make a room feel different. The people whose voices you can hear even after they're gone. And the people whose hand you still want to hold when almost everything else has become a memory. Those were my people. That was my life. And if I had to live it all again, I'd still chase the acting. I'd still take the risks. I'd still walk onto those sets. But I'd understand much earlier that the greatest role I would ever play wasn't written in a screenplay. It was being a son, a father, a grandfather, a husband, a friend. Michael Caine gave me a career. But the people I loved, they gave Maurice Micklewhite a life. And in the end,